steady. I've got it lined.
All right, go ahead.
Looks true. Let's move to the next.
Magneto's on. Give her a pull, Lila.
Aye, she's heavy in this wind.
Let her settle. Try again.
Here she goes.
That's it. Good start.
At August 2nd, 1942, Belarus, 3:17 a.m. The forest was still. Only the whisper of wind moved through the pines. A lone figure crawled beneath a derailed German supply train. Her hands, bruised and trembling, pressed a final charge beneath the steel frame. Her name was Yelena Mazanik, a hotel maid turned partisan saboteur. In the distance, German troops shouted. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Yelena froze, then slipped silently into the night. Seconds later, a deafening blast tore open the quiet forest. The German commander she had been ordered to eliminate would never wake again. World War II was not only fought on beaches, in skies, and across vast front lines. It was also fought in shadows, back rooms, factories, forests, by women whose names were almost never recorded. This is their story. War had erupted across continents. Nations collapsed under blitzkrieg. Armies bled across deserts, tundra, and oceans. But behind every battle map was another world. A hidden theater filled with women who carried nations on their backs. Some worked as spies. Some built aircraft. Some smuggled weapons. Some rescued wounded men from burning fields. Some preserved codes, secrets, and supply lines. Great Britain, the Soviet Union, the United States, France, Poland, China, India, Yugoslavia. Every nation relied on them. Yet, history often placed them in the footnotes. This documentary brings them forward, one by one, region by region, restoring the human stakes, the danger, and the bravery. At June 7, 1944, Limoges, France, a 23-year-old widow with dark hair and steady eyes stepped from a British Lysander aircraft onto occupied soil. Her orders: reorganize scattered French resistance groups after D-Day. Her enemy, the SS Das Reich Division, experienced, brutal, relentless. She carried only a Sten gun, cyanide pill, and a few phrases of coded poetry. 3 days later, the SS surrounded her convoy. Gunfire erupted. Violette stood her ground, firing until her magazine ran dry. Captured, tortured, executed at Ravensbrück. But the resistance she rallied crippled German logistics for weeks. Her courage delayed an entire division. Daughter of an Indian Sufi mystic, a quiet musician who despised violence. Yet she became Britain's first female radio operator sent into occupied France. The average life expectancy for a radio operator in Paris: 6 weeks. She survived 5 months, constantly hunted, constantly moving. The Gestapo never saw her face. When they finally caught her, she said only, "I will not speak." She never did. Detroit, Long Beach, Seattle, Buffalo. Women poured into factories, assembling B-17 bombers, welding Liberty ships, forging artillery. Some worked 16-hour shifts. Some raised children alone. Some earned half the wage of men. But American output reversed the tide of war. 17 million American women entered the workforce. A historic shift that helped build the arsenal that defeated the Axis. More than 1,000 women pilots ferried fighters, bombers, and transport planes. They tested aircraft after repairs. They flew through storms. They towed live-fire targets for gunners. They endured risk without military rank, without benefits, without recognition. 38 were killed. Their coffins were sent home at family expense. Yet their service freed thousands of male pilots for combat missions. The Soviet Union enlisted women on a scale unmatched by any other Allied nation. 309 confirmed kills. One of the deadliest snipers in human history. At Sevastopol, she faced elite German marksmen. Mortars rained down. Battlefields became mud, ash, and bone. But she stayed. Cold, focused, precise. When Americans doubted her record during her U.S. tour, she responded, "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old and I have killed 309 fascists. Do you not think that you have been hiding behind my back for too long? Soviet female pilots flying outdated wood and canvas P-2 biplanes. They cut their engines at night, gliding silently over German camps. The Germans feared them so deeply, they awarded an Iron Cross to anyone who shot one down. These women flew up to 15 missions a night, in freezing skies under anti-aircraft fire, often navigating with simple compasses and the stars. The Gestapo labeled her their most dangerous Allied spy. She smuggled downed pilots, forged documents, blew up bridges, led 7,000 Maquis fighters in the Auvergne. Her greatest weapon was not violence. It was deception. A social worker in Warsaw, a mother of two, a quiet face in crowded streets. But she smuggled 2,500 Jewish children out of the ghetto, hiding their names in jars she buried beneath an apple tree. Caught, tortured, sentenced to death. She escaped and continued her mission until war's end. Women who carried medical supplies through bombed-out provinces. Some treated wounded soldiers in mud huts. Some died beneath Japanese artillery. Their names rarely entered archives. As Japanese forces pushed toward India, field hospitals overflowed. Indian nurses worked in choking humidity, treating wounds infected by jungle rot, malaria, dysentery. They were unarmed, yet they stayed while shells burst around them. The climax of this documentary is not a single battle. It is a revelation that the war's most decisive moments, the code broken, the pilot saved, the convoy halted, the bomb assembled, the wounded carried, the resistance strengthened, often depended on women few history books mentioned. At February 1945, Germany, a team of female Soviet partisans crept beneath a bridge loaded with German reinforcements bound for the Eastern Front. Snow fell silently. Their breath froze in the night air. Explosives wired. Fuses lit. A blinding flash. Steel buckled. An entire regiment halted. It delayed German defenses long enough for Soviet armor to break through days later. A field hospital was overwhelmed by wounded. American nurses worked knee-deep in mud, guiding stretchers under artillery fire. One nurse recalled, "The earth shook, but we did not. We could not." Their efforts saved thousands. Anti-aircraft guns roared. Yet the planes kept coming silent, drifting, releasing bombs one after another. German soldiers swore the witches were not human. They were wrong. They were teenagers, farm girls, students, volunteers, driven only by duty. Yelena Mazanik's bomb, the one placed beneath German Commissioner Wilhelm Kuba, crippled Nazi authority in Belarus for months. One maid changed an entire region's resistance landscape. War ended in 1945. Soldiers marched home. Cities rebuilt. Flags rose again over liberated nations. But the women who worked in secrecy, who bled in silence, faded into the background. Many never received medals. Many never told their stories. Some never returned at all. Yet their actions echo through time. Factories they ran armed armies. Codes they carried saved fleets. Medicines they delivered saved nations. Secrets they protected toppled tyrannies. Children they rescued built new lives. Battles they supported shaped the peace that followed. History remembers the thunder of war, but often forgets the quiet footsteps that shaped its course. These women walked softly and changed the world. Bletchley Park, England. Winter 1941. Frost clung to the roofs. The air smelled of burning coal and damp earth. Inside the wooden huts, thousands of women, clerks, translators, mathematicians, sat beside humming machines. They were called the Wrens, members of the Women's Royal Naval Service. Most had no idea their work would shorten the war by years. Rows of rotating drums clattered like mechanical thunder. A young Wren, barely 20, leaned forward as the machine slowed, clicked, stopped. She scribbled down the output, pattern, a breakthrough. This message would help decode a German naval signal and allow Allied ships to evade a wolf pack lurking in the Atlantic. She stood, stretched her aching shoulders, and moved to the next machine. No applause, no recognition, Only the knowledge that every flicker of code might save hundreds of lives. Reflection. These women held the weight of the sea in their hands, but could tell no one. Decades later, when the files were declassified, the world learned the truth. 3/4 of Bletchley Park staff were women. Without them, Enigma might never have been cracked. Poland, Hungary, France. A name spoken in whispers. Christina Skarbek, codename Christine Granville, skiing through frozen mountain passes, smuggling intelligence to the Allies. She convinced German officers to release arrested resistance leaders by sheer force of will. Churchill once called her the most dangerous woman of the war. Born in Baltimore, leg amputated below the knee after a hunting accident. But war erased limitations. She infiltrated France as a reporter, organized sabotage teams, gathered intelligence, and evaded the Gestapo, who referred to her only as the woman who limps. When the Germans closed in, she hobbled across the Pyrenees in winter. Cold, exhausted, her wooden leg, nicknamed Cuthbert, froze with each step, but she survived. Later, she returned to France to continue her work. Her operations destroyed German supply lines months before D-Day. At January 1943, Stalingrad, gunfire echoed through ruined factories. Smoke choked the air. A teenage Soviet medic, Olga, crawled from crater to crater, dragging wounded soldiers back toward shelter. Mortars cratered the earth. The Volga River steamed with cold. She made her 20th trip before collapsing. These medics were not exceptions. They were thousands. Women of the Auxiliary Territorial Service served in anti-aircraft batteries across Britain. Operating height finders, tracking equipment, and radar units, they stood beneath falling bombs and burning skies. One ATS veteran recalled, "We did not fire the guns, but without us, they could not." After Pearl Harbor, families were forced into internment camps across America. Women became teachers, nurses, mechanics, carpenters, trying to preserve dignity behind fences and guard towers. Some volunteered as translators for the U.S. Army. Some sent sons to the 442nd Regiment, which became the most decorated unit in U.S. military history. They served a nation that questioned their loyalty, yet they never wavered. Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne. When Allied bombings reduced cities to ruins, Trümmerfrauen, the women of the rubble, lifted stones with bare, bleeding hands. They rebuilt streets, cleared railway lines, reconstructed homes. Even as the Nazi regime collapsed around them, they worked to create a future from dust. Shells fell like hammer blows. The roar never ended. Yet American nurses moved calmly through collapsing tents, guiding stretcher teams, steadying hands that trembled with blood loss. They learned to ignore the whistle of incoming shells, to wrap wounds in darkness, to run between explosions. One nurse wrote in her diary, "Courage is not loud. It is the quiet voice that says, 'Go again.'" At February 1942, a group of Australian nurses survived the sinking of their escape ship. They reached shore exhausted but alive. Captured by Japanese forces, they were marched into the surf and executed. Only one survived, Sister Vivian Bullwinkle, wounded, barely clinging to life. Her testimony after the war revealed one of the worst atrocities committed against medical personnel. War creates heroes in silence. But to understand their legacy, we must follow them into the darkest nights and the brightest dawns of courage. Deep in the mountains of Hunan and Guangxi, young women carried encrypted messages through territory patrolled by Japanese troops. No radios, no vehicles, only narrow forest trails and courage. Wrapped in plain cloth or hidden in bamboo tubes, these messages determined ambush points, supply runs, and evacuations. One mistake meant torture and death. Yet these women walked on, barefoot, silent, unseen. As Japanese forces seized Manila in 1942, women formed secret intelligence rings. Teachers, farmers' wives, students. They mapped enemy fuel depots, recorded troop movements, smuggled food to starving POWs, Some fought as guerrillas in Luzon's dense jungles, carrying worn rifles and worn spirits. Their daring actions fed the Allied intelligence pipeline that shaped General MacArthur's return to the Philippines. The climax of this documentary is the hidden turning point, a moment when countless women across continents changed the war without a single headline. The Allies prepared for the liberation of France. But Operation Overlord depended on information. Bridges, fuel depots, troop strengths, railway timetables. Across France, hundreds of women, from grandmothers to waitresses to schoolgirls, sent one last wave of intelligence to Britain. Coded telegrams, radio bursts, handwritten notes passed through train windows. In Paris, a young resistance courier slipped a final message beneath a loaf of bread, then boarded a bicycle and pedaled through German checkpoints. That one message, detailing a shift in German defenses, was relayed to London. It reached Eisenhower's desk within hours. This hidden network, largely female, shaped the timing of D-Day's supporting operations. Female partisans sabotaged tracks, cut telegraph lines, poisoned supplies, and guided Red Army units through forests. One night, in the dense pines of Smolensk, a group of young women, most under 20, detonated a charge that derailed a German armored train. The explosion echoed for miles. Hours later, Soviet armor punched through the weakened line. The offensive succeeded. The front shifted. Searchlights raked the sky. Anti-aircraft fire burst around the gliding biplanes. Yet the night witches kept coming. Their slow, fragile aircraft were supposed to be obsolete, but they struck deeper and deeper into German lines. On this night, they hit a German supply camp so effectively that an entire division's advance stalled for 3 days. One squadron of young women stopped an army. When Paris was liberated, when Warsaw fell and rose again, when Berlin collapsed, women who had risked everything returned home quietly. Some found their families gone. Some had no homes left to walk into. Some carried their trauma in silence for decades. Those who survived the camps, nurses, partisans, couriers, rarely spoke of what they endured, but their resilience shaped the post-war world. Filipino guerrilla women, Chinese medics, and Southeast Asian resistance fighters walked into uncertain futures. Some were celebrated. Many were overlooked. Some vanished into the anonymity of village life. Their stories resurfaced only because their children or grandchildren dug through memory, diaries, and whispered testimonies. The war took more than lives, took voices. Women who served in secrecy remained bound to their oaths for decades. British SOE agents were forbidden from speaking of their missions until the 1990s. Bletchley Park codebreakers kept silent for nearly 40 years. Soviet partisans feared reprisals in the post-war era. Many died without recognition. Their silence was not weakness. It was duty. But now, history is finally listening. The world that rose after 1945 was shaped profoundly by these women. Factories they ran became the backbone of modern labor equality. Military roles they pioneered evolved into today's integrated forces. Intelligence networks they sustained became the seeds of modern espionage agencies. Risks they took saved nations and generations. The war ended, but their influence did not. Their courage rewrote boundaries, not only of nations, but of possibility. At August 2, 1942, Belarus, 3:17 a.m. The scene from the opening. Yelena Mazanik vanishes into the night. The bomb explodes. History shifts. A nurse tying a bandage in a collapsing hospital at Anzio. A wren listening to a machine slow, then stop. A night which gliding over a silent field. A Polish courier hiding a message in her sleeve. A Filipino girl handing rice to a starving POW. A Chinese medic stitching a wound by lantern light. A librarian in London decoding an intercepted signal. A mother in Warsaw burying a jar of children's names under an apple tree. War is often told through the men who fired the guns. But victory was carried on the backs of women, who asked for nothing and gave everything. They fought without glory. They served without praise. They changed the world, and history is finally remembering their names.